I cannot believe I have joined you guys every week for the last 57 weeks. I've covered identity, love, dating, friendship, philosophy, a bit of grief, reinvention, quitting, starting over, loneliness, ambition, and almost everything in between. And that is not a small thing. Good morning, and welcome back to the Sage Sorority. How are we all doing, guys? Happy Thursday. Woo! It is so nice to speak to you guys. First episode post the gathering. It was a great day. What can I say? For those of you that are listening and you were there, you know exactly how I felt, what it was about. The vibes were very high. In addition to the gathering, it has been a crazy IWD day, week, month. I don't know if the other female entrepreneurs are feeling it, but it has been such a busy women's month for me. Self-inflicted, of course. I've been out meeting people, networking a lot lately, and networking gets such a bad rap sometimes, but networking is life. That is something that is inevitable. And I like it. Sometimes it's tiring. Sometimes I feel like I've said the same thing a million times, but it is so invigorating, and I use that word on purpose, getting out and meeting other women. Sometimes you really think that you live in like your own little bubble and you're kind of the only one doing what you're doing, not in like an egotistical way, but like, wow, does anyone feel the same way that I do? Is anyone having the same struggles that I am? And they are, which is partially what the Sage Sorority is about. And going out and meeting incredible female founders, by the way, like there are so many women just in this country alone, in this general city area alone, that are doing amazing things. Like I am blown away. So it's so nice to meet people like that in real life that I probably wouldn't cross paths with in my regular life, in my social life. So it has been a really, really nourishing, invigorating, inspiring month. And I hope wherever you are, that you are soaking up all the IWD goodness because we really deserve. Yeah, so the gathering happened on March 5th, which was during IWD week. IWD, you guys, is International Women's Day, just in case you don't know, but so much shorter to just say IWD because International Women's Day is literally a mouthful. Amazing, amazing room. Thank you to all that joined. It was very inspiring, very validating. Nerve-wracking, but I'm so happy I did it, and I'm so happy I ripped the Band-Aid off. Such a great crowd, and I hope if you were there that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Next event is absolutely coming. I'm thinking either late spring or early summer. Of course, I will announce it on the pod first and foremost. Follow along on Instagram, definitely for social updates like that. I'm also working on the Sage Sorority website, but absolutely Instagram. And once the website is live, of course, I'll announce it to all of our lovely pod listeners here to sign up for the newsletter so that I can email people right away and they can buy tickets first because that's where the conversation lives and it's just a lot more organized. Quick housekeeping as a beautiful reminder. This is our last episode before our production break. I will be back April 9th, Thursday, April 9th with episode 58. The break is absolutely intentional. There's a lot that I have to do behind the scenes, and I just need a little bit of time and space to get it done. So, love you and leaving you for 3 weeks-ish. I will be back on April 9th. Okay, let's get into it. We know what we talked about last week. I was giving you guys the intro arc to the Sage Sorority. And these 2 episodes last week and this week, yes, it's for beginners. If you are new here, I've met a lot of new people over the last few weeks. So if you are new to the pod, welcome, welcome, welcome. But also, if you have been a loyal listener since the beginning, this is also a really good refresher of our thesis of what we talk about here. So let's go. We started last week with episodes 1 to 25, the intro arc, as I said. Now we're going to transition into episodes 26 through 55. This is truly the second chapter of the Sage Sorority, and I want to walk you through what we've built, why it mattered, and exactly where you should go depending on what you're navigating in life right now. So again, like I said, this is for the brand new listener who maybe needs a map and a little bit of an orientation, and also the loyal listener who needs a bit of a reminder of how far you've come and everything that you already know. So we're going to get into the first part, which is identity and self-concept. Huge topics and themes that we talk about here. And I'm going to lead in with this with episode 32, which is how to be more interesting. One of our highest downloads ever. You guys really like that episode. I love it too. I loved creating it. And this episode really resonated because I think being interesting in our lives is the key to a lot of things. It's not actually about being interesting for other people. That's the bait. The real thesis is having a rich and interior life, especially when we talk about dating. You got to be interesting, and men can't be the focus of everything that you do, say, think, and believe. Being someone who has genuine opinions and not afraid to stand on it, genuine curiosity, curiosity is hot, genuine obsessions, things that were not fed to you by an algorithm. The most magnetic women are not out there performing for their lives. They are inhabited, they are embodied, they are sensual. This episode is a direct challenge to the version of yourself that has been running on autopilot. And if anything about self-concept, who you are, where you're going, and who you want to be outside of labels is interesting to you, no pun intended, highly recommend you start with episode 32. Episode 33, The Art of Charm, Storytelling, Niche Interest, and Presence, and then episode 55, How to Be More Interesting Part 2, are really the masterclass in presence. If you've ever felt invisible in a room or boring in conversation, like you have nothing interesting to say, that trilogy is really your prescription. So obviously, episode 55 reigns similar to episode 33, but we add in a few more concepts, especially from the author Matthew Dix, about finding one story-worthy moment in your everyday. And it absolutely reframes ordinary life as genuine, interesting material. You don't need extraordinary experiences to be interesting, far from the truth. You just need to pay attention to the experiences that you're already having. Episode 38, then we get to episode 38, which was part 5 in my Autumn Energy series. And this one was the rebrand era. You guys loved this episode. I think of all the episodes in that series, and this was done in October, this was definitely the most popular. This is the identity episode that often gets underestimated because it sits inside the series, but it's actually one of the most practically useful. It is truly about letting your outside finally catch up with your inside, the version of you that everyone expects, the wardrobe, the aesthetic, the way you show up. Sometimes it can crystallize around an old version of yourself. But this episode is really good because it's giving you permission to update that presentation without betraying your foundation. I hope that makes sense. A good companion thought here is Maya Angelou's idea that you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been, because rebranding yourself is not a rejection of who you are and who you were, but it is an evolution and you should treat it as such. And then finally, in the identity and self-concept genre, we have episode 54, of course, Stop Waiting, You Are Already Her. This one deserves a call out in this section because it is essentially the identity episode that brings everything home. The idea is wildly simple. The woman that you're waiting to become is already inside you because you would not have that vision if it didn't already exist inside of you. Stop waiting for permission or the right circumstances or the right weight or enough confidence. Just stop waiting, period. And this episode tells you exactly how and why you should do that. Next, we're going to get into section 2, which is dating and love. Although I mentioned before, and I've mentioned many times on the pod, I'm very conscientious about dating content because a lot of it can come off low vibrational, and I always want to be thoughtful and considerate with what I say. But what really changes with me and the type of dating content that I put out, especially in this second chapter of Sage, is the depth of the conversation. So we're starting off with episode 41, which was attraction versus compatibility versus capacity. One of my personal favorite episodes for sure. This is a true framework episode. Attraction gets you in the door. Compatibility tells you if you can build something, but capacity, true emotional capacity, lifestyle capacity, the ability to show up for another person is the part that nobody talks about and is the one that ends the most promising relationships. Because you can be wildly attracted to someone, deeply compatible on paper, and still be completely wrong for each other because one of you simply do not have the capacity for what the other needs right now in this time and space. That is the key part. This is the episode that reframes the question from is he or she the right person to are we in the right place at the right time with the right bandwidth. If that at all sounds very confusing to you, highly recommend you listen to episode 41. We go into it in great depth, and I think at the end you'll have a lot of clarity. A really good thread to just mention here is in episode 3, I talked about the relationship blueprint, where our patterns come from, and episode 41 is really like the grown-up continuation of that. So once you understand your own personal blueprint, you can start making clear decisions about capacity. They're truly companion episodes, even though they're 38 episodes apart. Next, we're going to circle to episode 31, which is safety versus chemistry, what matters. One of the most honest conversations in dating, because chemistry is so wildly intoxicating, but it is also often so misleading. Safety is unsexy and often underrated, but sexy is what drives the boat. This episode doesn't give you a clean answer, and that is truly intentional, but it does give you a much better question to ask yourself. The red thread in this is also from Esther Perel's work, who I find very smart and very useful and very insightful. She talks about how we often confuse anxiety for attraction and how the nervous system can mistake familiarity with chemistry. It's worth mentioning, if you do want to get a little bit deeper on this kind of stuff, I highly recommend you looking into Esther Perel's work. Although you might not agree with 100% of what she has to say, it does kind of tickle your brain in the right way, and we start to explore relationships with much greater depth than I think we did growing up. Then we're going to cap off this section with episode 49, which is the only dating advice you need. Listen, this episode is real AF and very frank. This is your distillation episode. After all the nuance and all the frameworks and all the gray area and all the texture and blah, 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 this is really the episode that strips it back to bare bones. Conceptually, you can really pair this with episode 51, why putting yourself out there isn't working and what to do instead, which is a more tactical take on the same world, but the only dating advice you need is very clear and simple, and we go into that in episode 49. Section 3, friendship and sisterhood. Of course, we dive into this. We will always dive into this on the Sage Sorority. Friendship episodes usually generate the most DMs for me, not the dating ones. Surprise, surprise. And that tells me a lot about what women are carrying and not talking about. And that's why it is so, so, so important for me to talk about this consistently and with great consideration on the Sage Sorority. And it's so interesting because one of the networking events I went to the other day was hosted by Female Founders Rise. And the founder, Emmy Faust, is an incredible entrepreneur in the UK. And she helped create the report on the status of female entrepreneurship in the UK. And loneliness and connection was such a high marker for women in entrepreneurship. And it ties into our lives, right? We've never been more connected to people, and yet we have never felt more lonely. So this is a really important thing. I want us to always talk about how do we meet better people? How do we be better people? How do we stay connected to each other, et cetera, et cetera. So with that said, episode 44, the Sisterhood Chronicles Part 4, why adult friendships can feel draining, is a great one to start. This is the episode that names the thing that nobody really wants to say out loud. Adult friendships can be difficult, not because we're bad friends, but because we are exhausted trying to maintain deep connections on an empty tanks. Frankly put, our lives are more complicated and more textured now in our 30s and 40s than they ever were. And we can emphasize that with our lives are more textured and complicated now than any other moment in modern times. So the episode gets really honest about the asymmetry in friendships when the effort isn't equal and the energy is not returning, and what to do with that information without necessarily blowing everything up. Highly recommend. Then we get into episode 45, 3 patterns that I'm noticing in women's dating and friendships right now. This is more of a bridge episode, so it connects the friendship and dating worlds and names what I feel like I'm noticing in real time. It's worth noting that this is truly an evergreen episode. Like, the patterns that I mention in episode 45 are not trends. They are true like patterns that I don't think are going anywhere. And I think that it's an episode you could revisit often enough. A good through line just to mention here is that I am committed from the start that the Sage Sorority would take female friendship seriously as a subject. It's not as an appetizer or side salad to romantic love. It is complete in of its own world, and the research backs this up. Friendship among women are directly linked to lower cortisol levels, longer lifespan, and stronger immune function. Dr. Shelley Taylor's work at UCLA coined the term tend and befriend to describe this perfectly. Episode 6 started with that argument, and then these episodes, episode 44 and 45, deepen them. And then finally, of course, section 4, and we really dived into this a lot more in the second chapter of the Sage Sorority, and that's philosophy, mindset, and the bigger picture. Episode 34 through to episode 38, the autumn energy, the great lock-in, through to the rebrand era really talks about this. This is a 5-part series arc. It's not 5 separate episodes, if that makes sense. It's the first time we ever did like our own series, and I will definitely do one again when I feel inspired. Or if you have an idea for a series, please message me. You know where to find me and let me know. And I think this really showed what the show is capable of in terms of committing to a theme over multiple weeks and gives you guys a full fleshed out story to tell. The through line of this series is essentially autumn does not have to be this weird comma if you don't want it to be. It's like summer is crazy and then winter is crazy and then autumn is just kind of like in the middle. But actually, it can be dubbed as your own new year. This is really when you should start planning your next year as opposed to waiting until Jan 1. We are in the depths of winter. It is truly a hibernation and a grounding moment. Read the book Wintering if you haven't. It really goes into this in great detail. We know that spring and autumn, the comma seasons, are really when you recharge, you rebuild, and you restart, in my opinion. You use it to lock in, go deeper, assess what you've built, and step into the next version of yourself. For any listener who's in a season of transition or recalibration, this series is a great, great option for you, and it is truly a complete toolkit. Although it says autumn energy, just swap out the word autumn for spring, and you can listen to it now. And it is exactly what we all need. Then we have episode 40, Why Philosophy Still Matters, especially for women. One of my favorite episodes, an episode that I got a lot of personal feedback on as well. I think this is one of the few episodes that really makes the Sage Sorority different. Nobody else is doing this for this audience, and I believe that. The idea that philosophy, ethics, epistemology, how we know what we know, is not abstract or ridiculously academic, but it is actually the most practical tool a woman can have for navigating modern life. Single, engaged, dating, divorced, widowed, married, whatever the case. Discernment is epistemology. Knowing your values is ethics. You're already doing philosophy, hun. Sorry to break it to you. And this episode truly gives it the language. Episode 42, I discussed my 7 years in London, what London has taught me about womanhood, love, reinvention, and myself. This is more of a memoir style episode of this range, and it's worth a highlight because it's one of the most personal. It's truly not advice. It's my own testimony to living here. And sometimes personal testimony is more useful than advice. So, because it shows what's actually possible. So, if you want a little bit of a BTS in my life, in my brain, highly recommend episode 42. Then we go to episode 48. It's Quitter's Day, so here's your permission slip. This is one of my more sharp and contrarian episodes because the thesis is that quitting is not the opposite of discipline, and sometimes the most disciplined thing you can do is to quit. So it's the Sage Sorority's take that doesn't just validate, but it also challenges. Seth Godin writes about this in The Dip. If you're not familiar with his work, you definitely should look it up, especially if you're a creative. The idea that strategic quitting is different from giving up, and knowing the difference is truly a skill. It is a good reference without going too deep, and if you're anyone who's on the brink of change or on the brink of your own pivot, and you're trying to figure out what to do, highly recommend episode 48. And then finally, we're going to go all the way back to episode 28, which is 5 self-worth lessons I wish I knew sooner. Love, 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 love. This truly comes from the heart. It's one of my most evergreen episodes. It'll never get old. Self-worth is the underbelly of almost everything we talk about here. Dating choices, friendship dynamics, how you show up in rooms, how you show up for yourself, what you tolerate, what you ask for. And this episode makes that very, very explicit and clear. And it's a good anchor for the entire section. So now let's get into your prescription. Okay, I'm not a doctor and this is not medical advice, but if I had to give you a prescription, TSS style, this is exactly what I would do. If you're in a season where you've outgrown yourself but don't quite know what comes next, start with episode 38, the rebrand era. Then you're going to go back to episode 11, unlearning the lies from the first 25. Then sit with this question from James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed. Not everything can be changed until it's faced. Your next step isn't a rebrand. It's probably honesty with yourself. If your dating life feels like the same story with different people, I got you. We're going to start at episode 41. Attraction versus compatibility versus capacity is where you begin. Then you're going to go all the way back to episode 3, First Love, Forever Standards. Read or listen to anything by Esther Perel, specifically her concept of why we are drawn to what feels familiar even when familiar is painful. The pattern is not the problem, but not naming the pattern and recognizing it is. I hope that helps. If your friendships feel off and you can't explain why, you're going to start with episode 44 first. Then you're going to go to episode 25, the friendship audit from the first half. The book Big Friendship by Anne Friedman and Amina Toussaint, first of all, they used to have a podcast, I think, called Big Friendship. They were amazing. Is an incredibly honest account of what it actually takes to maintain a deep adult friendship. I read this book a long time ago on Audible. I love it. It's also narrated by the both of them. Worth recommending, truly. If you're in a season of wanting to quit something, a job, a relationship, a version of yourself, the city you live in, whatever, episode 48 is your go-to. Then you're going to pair it with episode 15, The Courage to Evolve, from the first half. And remember that quitting the wrong thing is how you make room for the right one. I love you. If you've been feeling like you have nothing interesting to say or nothing worth contributing, you're going to listen to episode 32. Then you're going to start the Matthew Dix Homework for Life practice tomorrow. One story-worthy moment every day in your notes app. Give it 2 weeks and watch what happens to how you see your own life. And finally, if you're just starting the Sage Sorority and you have no idea where to begin, I'm always going to say start with episode 1, the reset, but jump to episode 28, 5 self-worth lessons, is your second stop because self-worth is the foundation of everything we discuss here. Then you're going to go to episode 6, the Sisterhood Chronicles Part 1, our most popular episode, because that episode tells you exactly what kind of show this is and why it exists. Amazing. That is the pod. Obviously, like I mentioned, we're taking a 3-week break. I may prop up some of our most popular episodes in case you haven't listened to them in the feed to keep you cozy until we return on April 9th. I am so excited and looking forward to the balance of this year. I think this year has started off on a fucking high for me. Year of the Horse is top tier. Top 2, not 2, and I'm very pleased with myself. I cannot believe I have joined you guys every week for the last 57 weeks. I've covered identity, love, dating, friendship, philosophy, a bit of grief, reinvention, quitting, starting over, loneliness, ambition, and almost everything in between. And that is not a small thing. So thank you so much for joining me every week. The best is truly yet to come. We have a lot more to discuss. I love you guys so, 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 so much. Follow us on Instagram to keep up with what's going on during our production break. You know where to find me. And I will see you back here, same time, same place on April 9th. Bye.